What's the scariest true story you've heard or told? I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down, you know that gross trick some kids do with their upper eyelids? It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess, it was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva and within 2 days the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. TLDR, patient had a bug lay an egg in her eyelid and I removed the larva. What a terrible day to be literate. One day as a kid I was exploring the forests near our house with my cousin. The forest was on a hill, but there were several craters there because of bombs that were dropped there during the World Wars, Germany. One day we saw a backpack at the bottom of one. We tried to climb down, but it was kind of steep and slippery, so we didn't want to risk falling. We planned on returning later with a rope, and went home. The next day news story was that there was a backpack found with the remains of a girl, in that forest. A guy walking his dog found it, after the dog wouldn't stop barking and going crazy at the edge of the crater, while staring at the backpack. We stopped exploring the forests after. Edit, English is hard sometimes. You just got saved from being haunted by a memory for your whole effing life. So grateful for that. The bag even looked like it hasn't been there that long, still looked new. That's why we wanted to get it. We thought that maybe someone accidentally dropped it in there. To think that the person that dumped it there could have been still nearby. That's terrifying. It made me nauseous thinking about what you would see if you got down into that crater. One of my dad's friend's wife was murdered by some crazy dude walking down the street. This guy had just been released from a mental hospital and literally just stabbed her as she walked home. When my dad's friend came back he thought she had just taken the dogs out for a walk, so he walked along the normal walk route and he saw loads of blue lights. He was stopped by a police officer and wasn't allowed any closer until he saw that it was his wife. What exactly is the protocol there with police officers? Is it just Spider-Man rules where you just have to keep trying to get a peek until you can recognize them? I was walking down the street years ago and saw a cop standing on the path, who started asking me how my day was and trying to make conversation as I got closer to him. Turns out my neighbor was dead on his front lawn and that the cop was trying to distract me from seeing the body. The neighbor had only died of a heart attack and I'm not shocked by death, so I just kept walking past. The cop didn't try to stop me or anything, he just asked, "Are you going to be all right?" Aw, what a nice dude. He could have said nothing, but he wanted to make sure you'd be okay. Yay, he seems like a good guy. Some people can get really distressed the first time they see a dead body, especially if it's someone you knew. It's one of the reasons I think it's important to take kids to funerals. Maybe a really rough one you should avoid, but taking kids to funerals for people who die of old age where it's more of a celebration of life than a time of mourning is a good thing to do. It eases them into it so that when the time comes for a necessary really rough one they won't be completely blindsided by the process. My mother never taught me to swim because when she was a teenager she saw a friend get sucked into a whirlpool at the bottom of a drainage lake that is the deepest body of water within a few hundred miles of us. They didn't find his body for days. My dad watched his brother drown as a child and was unable to do anything about it, because he was so young and didn't know how to swim. Completing 8 levels of swimming lessons was mandatory for me as a child. When I was young, I saw a documentary about a guy who got flesh-eating bacteria in his nasal cavity. It ate his face and he's still alive. Eventually they removed the bacteria by removing the eaten parts of his face. He got a prosthetic face, which back in those days was basically a plastic Halloween mask that tried to look human. At the end of the documentary, he took the mask off. His face from his forehead down to his mouth was just a hole. Edit, it was a fungus, not bacteria. apparently. Well, I didn't need sleep tonight. It's really weird. I used to work in San Diego near a military base, and one guy that worked there suffered horrible burns. You can tell he gets a lot of negative attention, but I just treat him like a regular customer. Sometimes he'd get emotional to the point of tears, but he deserved a break from all the negativity and fear. There's a dude like that in my neighborhood who I've seen walking his dog. He's scary looking, it's true. I think people go out of their way to make sure he's treated like everyone else, but it must be just horrible to have to go through life like that. When I worked in healthcare, I had a patient who got a sinus infection. He stopped taking his antibiotics after a few days because he felt better. His sinus infection came back with a vengeance. When he got to the emergency department, he was presenting with stroke symptoms. The infection had spread to his cranial cavity. There was so much pus that it was twisting his brain. No one thought he would survive the surgery. The family was advised to expect the worst. Amazingly, he actually survived. He ended up needing 3 more surgeries to wash out and spent almost 2 months in the hospital. Take your full dose of antibiotics, people. This happened to a colleague, except he lay for 4 days semi-conscious on the floor of his house until another colleague went to look for him. He very nearly died. That is terrifying. Good on your other colleague for going to check on him. Man, now I have a new fear. Incredible imagery. I met a guy who had been traveling Australia with a couple friends, hitchhiking around as many of us had done. One of his friends told him they were near his distant uncle's house, whom he'd never met before. He got a phone number from a family member, and as they had hoped, the uncle offered them a place to stay. He picked them up in town and drove them out to his rural property way out in the bush. They said he seemed like a pretty normal guy, friendly and cheery. When it was time to set up a place to sleep, the uncle took them to a closet that was totally full of sleeping bags and bed rolls. They didn't think much of it at the time and all grabbed a kit and set up on the living room floor. They stayed a couple days and nothing out of the ordinary happened, and afterwards the uncle drove them to the bus station and they continued on their way. About a year later, that man was arrested and charged with several counts of murder. He was the man who was picking up young hitchhiking backpackers and slaughtering them. The guy who told me this story was 100% certain he had slept in the sleeping bag of one of his victims. I guess he didn't kill the guys cause one of them was his nephew? Or because people knew they were there. This is probably the only reason they are still alive. Classic nepotism. For real, nepotism runs rampant in the serial killer community. It really needs to stop. Ed Kemper's mom would like a world with you. Not up. But from what I gather, the nephew's family knew he would be there. If he had killed them, he would have gotten caught sooner. That's so crazy. I met an Australian girl while traveling last year. She said her mom had hitched a ride with this guy while backpacking. She got weird vibes from him and got out of the car at a gas station. He ended up driving off with her stuff still in the car. Later, the police contacted her because they found her backpack in this guy's house after catching him. Ivan Milat? The backpacker killer. When I was about 8 years old, our school was doing swimming lessons as part of the curriculum. My mom worked late, so we went to after-school care and didn't get home until after dark. When we got home, Mom asked me to take my wet togs, bathing suit, and towel out to the clothesline to dry so I could use them the next day. I was so confident going outside to do this and had this real feeling of being a big kid. I walked into our backyard only for a man to be running at me. I screamed, jumped inside, and instinctively locked the back door as I did so. As this was happening, my mom told me she heard the guy jump the gate, which was next to her bedroom, just after she heard me scream and came running to find me. I slept with the light on until I was 16, and I get my husband to go outside for me while it's dark. What the F? Yeah, it was pretty terrifying and obviously impacted me for life. The cops believed the guy was trying to break into our shed and I had startled him when I opened the back door. I don't think he was expecting a little kid to walk out. I'm not sure what it is about this story that I find so damn unsettling, but geez, no wonder it impacted you. I'd be scared forever. I am not sure I remember all the details correctly, but anyway. A guy was cleaning a giant cooking tank at a tuna factory. It was so big that he had to climb all the way in. Someone else didn't check and protocol was broken along the way somewhere. Second guy locked the barrel and turned it on, cooking the guy inside alive. Same idea, there was 2 men who got caught in a bread oven conveyor while doing maintenance and got stuck and ended up being baked alive. One survived all the way until the end and died on the floor. One died inside. Lockout procedures exist for these exact reasons. Follow them. That bread oven story haunts me. They got in to do a repair knowing the oven was still hot, but it had been off for 24 hours at this stage, so they figured it would have cooled down enough. The company didn't want to wait longer with the line stopped before carrying out the maintenance, as it would impact on profits and production. They took out baskets that hold the raw bread on the conveyor belt, climbed onto the conveyor and started it up. Almost straight after moving into the oven on the conveyor, the maintenance guys knew it was too hot, but they couldn't come back out because other baskets on the conveyor were blocking their way back out. The only way out for them was to continue moving the conveyor through the oven, a slow process, which was essentially baking them. Their screams could be heard initially by those outside assisting with maintenance. Then their screams stopped. One man was dead on exiting the oven at the other end. The second man died soon after. Similar story of a man that fell into a huge container of hot oil that Frito-Lay uses to make chips. He died instantly. Better that way, I'd think. Still absolutely horrible. Lodo, lockout tagout. It works, but you have to use it. A young lady had an affair with her boss in the 1960s, got pregnant. After threatening to tell her boss's wife, she was killed by her boss, who then put her body in an industrial barrel. He hid the barrel in his house for years and none of the various owners opened it due to the weight. Finally, one guy decided to dispose of it in the 90s, and when he opened it, he saw it contained something. An investigation traced the barrel and girl back to the man, who then killed himself before police could come arrest him after confirming he was the father of the unborn baby via DNA. The lady's mother was in her late 80s when she was told her missing daughter was finally found. She claims that she had been having dreams about her daughter being inside a metal container for years after she had gone missing. Web link. Seen that Forensics File episode a time or two. Other details, if I recall correctly, is he was the owner of some sort of textile factory and she was a worker there. Dude got the metal drum from work, put the body in it, filled and sealed it, and didn't realize how heavy it would be and ended up storing it under a crawl space on his deck/porch. Home passed through another owner or two before the barrel was discovered. Reckless, just decided to sell the house and leave the body there. If I recall correctly from my memory of the house, it was something like hidden under the front deck/porch in like a rather large crawl space. That's not something you'd expect to be used or intended to be used as storage space by looking at it. AKA it's something they found because they were doing remodeling or construction on the house. After he sealed it up, there probably wasn't a good way to get back in there to remove it without creating suspicion. I'm glad the guy effed up and got caught, but his only mistake really was selling the house before he died. Hey. I won't critique his murder strategy and body disposal, but I will argue that his biggest mistake was committing murder in the first place. Coworker's dad was babysitting his baby boy for him. At one point, Granddad went into the nursery to check on the baby and found that he'd somehow reached for the window blind strap and tangled himself up in it to the point where he was choking. Baby was already blue and all of the veins in his face had popped. Grandpa frantically dialed 911. EMS was there in 2 to 3 minutes and they brought the little fellow back to life and he's okay now. Edit, wow, you guys really blew this up overnight for me. For the parents here freaking out, really, check to see how close to the crib any hanging cords like this are. When they brought the little guy to the hospital, they separated and questioned the parents and grandpa over and over like they were suspected of doing this on purpose. Of course, it got sorted out as a true accident. The child is now in his 20s and all is well with him. That's why all blinds now are choke-free, and if force is applied they snap in a connected bead. I'm not explaining this very well, but yeah, this doesn't happen with knee blinds now. I saw a TikTok about why they make them choke-free and I literally thought it was a joke because I couldn't understand how a baby would wrap it around his neck. It would astonish you, all the ways babies manage to hurt themselves. All humans spend the first few years of their lives trying to kill themselves. You can thank your parents for you surviving your own actions. I was in class in 10th grade and the teacher was asking everyone how their weekend was. The quietest girl in the class spoke and while breaking down in tears said she was on a trip in the mountains with her mom. They made a stop for some reason and she looked over the cliff and saw an overturned vehicle with a dead family scattered about. I recently saw an accident where the man was getting chest compressions in the middle of the highway. I really regret looking. I just keep picturing how much his chest was depressing, knowing his ribs were breaking. I was driving home from work one afternoon and came across an accident. I was one of the first people there. I got out of my car and ran over, broken glass everywhere, and there was a limp body hanging out of the driver's side window and a puddle of blood collecting under his head. I called the police, but they were just pulling up as I did. They asked me to leave, but I never found out if the driver made it. A bit of a traumatizing experience. One time my mom came across an accident on her way home from work. 2 semis had crashed into each other, completely squashed together. It just looked like a normal accident and both drivers seemed fine as the police and ambulance had arrived. She didn't think too much of it, until she turned on the news that night. There had been a car between them, and the driver was one of my brother's teachers. Back in the 70s, some friends and I planned a camping trip to Northern Cali for a long weekend. We packed up and headed north on the highway. Somewhere around Bakersfield we picked up a hitchhiker headed to Kernville, who we dropped off before heading further north. So we get to our campsite and start getting things set up. My girlfriend finds a note tucked into the top of her backpack. It read, "I could have killed all of you." None of us slept that night. Maybe he was just warning you against picking up random hitchhikers. Probably. I used to be someone who stopped to help people on the side of the road. Mainly because I was stranded on the side of the highway, 10 miles from the nearest exit, and I swore that if anyone stopped to help me, I'd do the same for others. Someone did stop, so I kept my promise. Had a few grateful people over the years. More often, as cell phones became a thing, people's answer would be that they're fine, someone is on the way. Sometimes they need a jump start or something. As I got older, I realized how stupid that was. I'm an unarmed solo woman traveler. Ted Bundy would have loved my dumbass. Luckily now, with cell phones, it is rare that someone is truly stranded, so I don't have any guilt about driving past. Then I read a story about a grandmother and her 5-year-old granddaughter who were raped and beaten to death, all while the people laughed at them for being stupid enough to help them, and that was the end for me. Horrible nightmares from that story, just horrible. Edit to clarify, that last was a newspaper story, not a no sleep or something. A real event that happened on this planet. So hell yes, it gave me nightmares. Okay, that last paragraph is just all sorts of effed up. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.